Good afternoon, folks. Thank you for joining us today. As a quick double check before we get started, if you all could do, or maybe just one or two of you could do me a favor, if you can hear me, if you can type into the question box that you are able to hear. I know it's not necessarily a question. I would appreciate it just to make sure. Oh man, what a speedy group. Thank you. Oh, I like a lot of exclamation points here. Fantastic. Thank you to those that have confirmed that you can hear me. Okay, thanks. So once again, welcome, good afternoon, or perhaps good morning, depending on where you're located, and thank you for joining us for our webinar today, Connecting Student Affairs Assessment, Resources and Trends with Student Affairs Assessment Leaders, perhaps better known as SAAL. My name is Maureen Halton. I am one of the consultants here on the Campus Success team, and I am going to be doing a minimal amount of talking today since your SAAL board members will be delivering most of the information. Before I turn it over to them to introduce themselves, I wanted to mention just briefly our Campus Intelligence site, which is what all of you use to register for this webinar. Campus Intelligence is our new thought leadership space, which was launched last year as our way to reimagine data in higher education. Campus Intelligence offers something for all areas of campus, so whether you're focused on improving student engagement, assessing student learning, or perhaps aligning goals with your institutional mission, we're confident that you'll find valuable insights to support your daily work. So hopefully if you've got some free time in the next few days, you'll give that a peek. Without further ado, though, I want to now turn it over to our Student Affairs Assessment Leaders, panelists or board members who are going to be, again, delivering some great content and insights to you today.
I guess that would be my cue. Hi, my name is Pam Chessman. I am the Director of Assessment and Planning for the Division of Student Affairs and Enrollment Services at the University of Houston at our main campus. I have had the pleasure of being on our campus for non-consecutive 8 years and in this role for 4 years now, and joined the SAAL as soon as I joined in this role. So I've been on the board of directors in some role or fashion for 4 years now, and am now the SAAL chair.
Hi everybody, I'm Brian Burke and I am the Advancement Committee Chair for SAAL, and I've been involved with SAAL for about 4 years now, and I serve as a faculty member in the master's program in post-secondary education and our doctoral program in P20 leadership at Murray State University.
Hi everyone, my name is Whitney Brown. I am the Assessment and Strategic Projects Director at the University of Alaska Anchorage. I've been at UAA for about 4 years now, and prior to Alaska I was at the University of Albany in upstate New York. I am proud to serve as the new SAAL Professional Development Chair. I've been involved with SAAL for almost 4 years as well, and prior to my involvement with the Professional Development Committee, I served working with the Advancement Committee as well. So I'm really excited. In addition to SAAL, I also am involved with NASPA through the Assessment, Evaluation, and Research Knowledge Community, where I serve as the Region 5 representative.
Thank you, everyone. Again, this is Pam Chessman. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what is SAAL, or the Student Affairs Assessment Leaders Group. When we first started as an organization, it started with a discussion between Gavin Henning and Aaron Bentrim at what is now the NASPA's Assessment and Persistence Conference back in 2008. So through the years, SAAL has met either in person as a group or connected to other associations and organizations. Starting back in 2010, SAAL started meeting at either NASPA's annual conventions or ACPA's annual conventions, typically the day before conferences started. So at 8 years young, we are very young, but as a profession, student affairs assessment is also young, and I think that SAAL has played a great role in that. So today, you'll see some of our main goals of what we're looking forward to in terms of an organization. But really, we're here for professional support, in order to make sure that student affairs assessment efforts have enough skills and knowledge to be effective and to be ethical assessment leaders. A really important part for us also is our core functions are to look at networking and support, which we'll talk about through some of our committees and what we do. Also, professional development is a main core function for the Student Affairs Assessment Leaders Group, as well as advancing and disseminating assessment scholarship and practice. What you'll notice is that some of the benefits of membership for SAAL is the ability to vote through our elections process, also participation in our professional development programs. We also have a very healthy listserv, which has been a wonderful resource for professionals who are starting out, who are looking for things, for our more seasoned student affairs professional who are looking for opportunities to network with colleagues. Also, you can hold an elective office in one of our committees. So as an organization, we really are striving to connect and be a conduit for student affairs assessment professionals, regardless of where you are in your career. So that's a little bit about what SAAL does. I would like to also talk about our core functions through our committees. So our committee structure began in around 2011 and is very similar to what you see today. We have our External Relations Committee, which really focuses on collaborations and networking, looking for opportunities outside of our organization in order to enhance membership benefits. We also have a Governance and Administration Committee, which they focus on the bylaws, but also the resources that help run the organization, from our listserv and our social media efforts, our website, and those types of things. Also, we have a Membership Committee, and they're really focused on membership engagement, also the nuts and bolts of membership database, and our resource repository kind of bridges a lot of our organization between governance, administration, professional development, and membership. In our professional development, we'll talk a little bit more about that today, but that really focuses a lot on our structured conversations, which we host throughout the year, which we started, and we've had 8 of those in 2016. We also do Twitter chats, meetups, things in our conference meetings, and we will talk more about our open course today. Also, advancement as a committee really, again, is focused on advancing assessment scholarships and best practices, and we also have a journal, which we'll talk about more as well. The great thing about SAAL as an organization and structure is it's free as a way for colleagues to get together, so it's a membership where once you pay your dues, which is nothing, it starts paying for itself immediately. So I'd like to turn it over now to Whitney to Brian, to talk about our journal.
Sure, thanks, Pam. So as Pam mentioned, the purpose of the Advancement Committee is to help push forward student affairs assessment as its own discipline, as a distinct structure throughout higher education. And one of the signature pieces that has come out of the work of the Advancement Committee is the Journal of Student Affairs Inquiry. And this was launched in 2016. And the Journal of Student Affairs Inquiry is a peer-reviewed publication focused and aimed at those who seek to improve student experiences through evaluation and assessment, those who promote equity and access, those who make connections between theory and practice, and those who seek to advance the field of assessment in student affairs administration. And the journal really represents a unique space among scholarly journals within the field of student affairs and more broadly higher education because of that particular focus on inquiry within student affairs assessment practice. And it kind of helps situate this idea of inquiry in the work that's done within student affairs assessment. I'd like to share a brief passage from an article in the first issue that was written by the journal's editor-in-chief, Daniel Newhart. The intent of this journal is to open up new spaces, understandings, and learning about learning itself. The Journal of Student Affairs Inquiry is aimed at advancing the scholarship of assessment practice in student affairs. The term inquiry has been chosen intentionally to represent the ongoing reflection upon and implementation of assessment efforts in student affairs. All too often, Assessment is seen and approached in segmented chunks rather than ongoing and perpetual processes in which practitioner scholars engage in deep learning. Inquiry involves reflective and reflexive efforts to address universal and local contexts of assessment, evaluation, and research germane to student affairs." End quote. And in order to help provide some guidance in terms of, well, what does that all mean when it comes to writing a piece for submission, we have 5 broad categories that submissions that we seek would fall into. The first are peer-reviewed scholarly articles. So, for lack of a better term, the traditional journal article that we see. Somebody has conducted some type of empirical research and is reporting on that. The second is a review of literature or concept article. And so this is where someone is conducting a thorough review of scholarly literature that's been previously published and looking at that literature hopefully through some sort of novel lens or pushing some sort of conceptual framework for us to consider in engaging in the work of student affairs inquiry. The third is program evaluation or assessment reports. So I always like to situate this and frame it around the idea that we're all doing wonderful work on our campuses, and as we're learning about that work through systematic procedures, let's write it up and share it with each other. And that's part of the purpose of the journal, is that type of sharing. The fourth category would be a critical review of resources. So think about this in terms of book reviews that you might read in other journals, but providing a very critical lens, highlighting positives and negatives, great things, shortcomings, and not just books, but resources that are utilized in conducting this work, whether it's associations. That might be a weird one to think about, but I don't think there's anything that's not up for grabs when thinking about a critical review of resources when it comes to student affairs assessment practices. Then the final would be a letter to the editor or a response to a previously published article. And guidance for all of these can be found at the JSAI website, which is shown on the screen, jsai.scholasticahq.com. And with the journal, the editorial board has taken a themed approach with the first 3 issues that have been in the works. There are 2 that are out, the 3rd is on the way. But as we move forward, we're looking at, or the editorial board is looking at moving towards a more open and organic call for submission. And I want to make sure to point out that there are multiple opportunities for engagement with the Journal of Student Affairs Inquiry. It's either serving as a reviewer, pursuing board positions with the journal as those calls come out, writing letters to the editor or article responses, writing your own submissions. And so we want to make sure that we're encouraging engagement in as many venues as we possibly can with the journal. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Whitney to talk about the open course.
Thanks, Brian. I'm excited to share with the group today some exciting news about SAAL's new online open course. This is a new course called Applying and Leading Student Affairs Assessment. And so this is free, entirely free, super exciting. It's 8 weeks, and it's an online course that is a new partnership with the SAAL Professional Development Committee and Colorado State University. And it's been really exciting to be involved in this project because it began about 2 years ago when a group within the SAAL Professional Development Committee decided that it would be really great to be able to provide to SAAL membership these guides for professional development that support assessment practitioners in different stages of assessment through the different assessment processes from beginner to advanced levels. And so the group worked over 2015 into 2016 to develop those guides, and those guides are actually available on our SAAL website, but they're static guides that are very conversational in the reflective questions that they ask and have some really interesting outcomes for those guides. And what we've worked in over the last years, we've been partnering with Colorado State University to translate those guides into an interactive and engaging online open course. So we're really excited to be unveiling that super soon. Beginning in February of 2017, we will be releasing the registration website for that course. And so we'll be sharing that information through the SAAL listserv as well as on our SAAL website when that becomes available. So please watch out for that. And then the course itself will begin in April. And like I mentioned before, it's an 8-week course, so it'll continue throughout April and May. This course, I mentioned before, it's applicable to all different competency levels. So if you're new to assessment, if you're looking to build your assessment competencies, or you're seeking to advance your assessment leadership at the divisional level, this course really aims to support that at all levels. And I'm excited about it from the sense that if you're a senior assessment professional, you can engage with folks that are new to assessment and hone in on your strategies to help them develop their assessment competencies. And we have 3 incredible instructors who have great expertise that will be engaging with the students in the course as well. So we're very excited about that. I mentioned that it's an 8-week course, and those 8 weeks align with 8 modules. And so we have 7 learning outcomes that are focused throughout the course. And the course is designed to be self-paced, so while each week the instructor will focus on a new learning outcome in a new module, it's great because you can really dive into the course at any phase that fits your needs. So if there's a specific learning module that you're particularly interested, you can do just that module. You can do the whole course in its sequence within the 8 weeks. It's really choose your own adventure, however you would like to interact with that experience. We have 7 learning outcomes for this course, and they include items such as assessment culture and assessment planning, applying consulting and critique strategies, identifying success criteria and setting targets, exploring critical approaches and ethical considerations for assessment, using data to make decisions, and then the practical application of assessment practices. And then the 8th module is really connecting all of those pieces and how we can advance the field of student affairs assessment. So overall, we really hope that this course can aim to provide participants with an opportunity to develop and establish for themselves a sound assessment practice and a sustainable culture of evidence within their work, and that they'll be able to explore and engage the foundational assessment components revolving around planning, articulating goals and outcomes, providing feedback in a consultative role with their colleagues. We hope that you'll be able to identify and practice strategies for guiding assessment efforts across multiple functional areas. Many of us are leading assessment at the divisional level, so this goal is really important for us to be able to weave that throughout the course and building assessment capacity among teams. And lastly, we're hoping that you can further develop ways to translate data to stories of student success and plans for actions within your areas. So please watch for that, and that will be coming your way in February to start registering. And with that, I will turn it over to Pam to talk about ways that you can connect with us in other fashions.
Great, thank you, Whitney. Do want to make sure you know where our website is. So if you are not currently a member of SAAL, you can join SAAL by going to our website, which is studentaffairs.assessment.org. Our join, which would be join the conversation as well on our website. You can get connected to the listserv, be notified of our activities, especially all those wonderful professional development opportunities, really engage with what the journal is doing. It's a great place to join the conversation. It's also a wonderful sounding board once you're on the listserv if you have a particular area, whether you're concentrated in assessment within all of a division or within parts of a division, because again, in my role, I'm Student Affairs and Enrollment Services, so I can speak to both lenses. Some folks only have opportunities to have half the house. So it's a great place to kind of learn what's going on across the board. Also, we meet, as I mentioned earlier, every year during the annual convention time. This year we are meeting at ACPA's meeting, which we are going to meet on Sunday, the day before, or when the opening ceremonies start. We'll be meeting at 12:30 in the Greater Columbus Convention Center in room B233. And that will be an opportunity to engage with each other as a group. We do have guided conversations. We will be soliciting our listserv and our membership for some input on some of the conversational topics during that meeting. So we will network, but we will also cover content areas. So I'm excited about the opportunity to meet with members during the open meeting on Sunday, the 26th of March, and I hope you could join us if you were going to be at ACPA. I also think that this is a good natural transition time. If you do have any specific questions about SAAL in general or specifically about anything that we've mentioned, you can feel free to type a message into your questions box, and Maureen will be able to pull those out and we can address any specific SAAL questions before we move on to the second half of our topics for today.
Thanks, Pam. And while folks are working on typing any SAAL-related questions, again, right into the question box so we can read them out loud, we did have one question about, so you had referenced that, or Whitney referenced, that the course that's coming this spring is applicable to lots of different assessment competency levels. Would you say that SAAL is also open to folks of all assessment competencies, or is it really geared toward people who are leading assessment in a division, for example, that have a title related to assessment in some way?
That's a great question. I'll go in and answer that a little bit further. I would say yes, absolutely yes. It was personally super valuable to me when I began in my role full-time. And throughout the past 4 years, I've seen a number of folks jump on the listserv as well, expressing, hey, I'm new to my role. What advice do you have? How do I get started in engaging my team in building a culture of assessment? Different strategies for resources. So it's definitely great in that sense, and people are so enthusiastic to chime back into people's questions on the listserv and give some insights. And then there's also really deep conversations too about, we've gotten into some ethical conversations on the listserv about assessment practices. We have deep conversations about strategies for setting goals at the divisional level, how to use data visualization strategies and depicting key performance indicators at the divisional level. So it's really a strong community that's welcoming and supportive of all levels. And what I think is also really neat about our SAAL listserv functionality is that it has an archive. So once you become a member, you can access the SAAL archive of conversations. So for example, if you're looking for past conversations about how to train your staff on writing learning outcomes, you can look through this archive for keywords about creating learning outcomes in the division, and you can pull up threads of conversations that have happened over the past few years related to that topic. So yes, all levels.
And just to be accurate with what's in our bylaws, basically any student affairs professional interested in student affairs assessment or are charged to assessment are definitely welcome members. You don't have to have student affairs assessment in your job title. It is definitely a community of folks who do, so you do recognize that that is the majority of the membership. But folks who are on a divisional or even institutional committee for assessment are members. Folks who have ad hoc assessment responsibilities are members. So those are really generally who's there. Also, if you'll notice, Brian is faculty member, so we do have a higher education faculty who are members. So it's kind of a broad range of who are eligible to be members. So, and if you're interested, our bylaws are on the website as well. Hopefully that thoroughly answered the question.
I would say so. Thank you, Whitney and Pam. And it looks like Ted Elling, Ted, I hope I am not butchering your last name there, had a great nugget to add there that though you have over 800 members, only about 130 of those coordinate assessment for Student Affairs Division. And so I think that could certainly speak to folks who might not coordinate assessment becoming members or encouraging you to become members. And also encouraging folks who might not coordinate assessment, or even if you do, really taking advantage of that online course, since it sounds like it would be great and have applicability for all levels or competencies of assessment. Thanks, Ted. That's really helpful. Great use of data there. We have another question from Wallace here. Knowing that it will be difficult to choose, can you have, or can they, attendees presumably, have a section of the website with resources for people to review? For example, plans, goals, assessment reports, logic models, outcomes, graphics, etc. Alternatively, can you link to assessment sites of member institutions? And I think, Whitney, you may have mentioned this or referenced an assessment like repository, or I suppose that might be for the listserv, but I'm curious if you guys can speak to that possibility of offering resources or examples from other campuses.
Yes, we do have a resource repository. It is listed on our website, so you can find that, and it does have some of those similar resources that were mentioned. We do not actively link to other institutional websites. I do know that there are other associations that do that, so we didn't want to necessarily duplicate those efforts, but we definitely have a resource repository that does that, connect folks as well.
And I would just add as well that our resource repository is growing all the time. We're continually updating that throughout the year, so always check back to see if new information has been added, or if you have things that you want to share, feel free to email it to one of us, and we'll be glad to add it to the repository as well. And one of our SAAL goals for the year is also to look at our website and make it some enhancements to it, make it more user-friendly for our membership, and have those resources that you're looking for. So if there's any specific, any additional specific suggestions you have, please feel free to send those your way so we can incorporate that in our planning ahead.
Great. And Whitney, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the open course is not only for SAAL members. You don't have to be a member to take the open course, but probably the best way to find out what's going on with the course.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Great. Thank you both. And Wallace, as an FYI for you and certainly for other folks on the line, we will be at the very end of the webinar posting the emails of Pam, Whitney, and Brian, so you'll have an opportunity to grab their contact info. And though I didn't mention this at the beginning, we are recording this session, which will be sent to you in a follow-up with the email address that you used to register for the webinar. And so if you happen to miss one of those emails, you will have an opportunity to view that slide again in the recording. So thank you again, Pam and Whitney. And it looks like we have one more question here. Is there a limited number of spots for that online course, or the open course rather?
No, there's no limit at this point in time, and since this is our first year doing this course, it'll be exciting for us to see how many folks register, but we have 3 instructors for the course, so they're prepared for large numbers of students and are excited to begin engaging them. So, but we do encourage folks to register as soon as possible. That will definitely help us in our preparation for the April launch.
Okay. Thanks, Whitney, and thank you, Sarah. That was a good question. I'm glad that you had asked that. We have another question related to the course from Rodrigo. Are you planning to offer the course next year or another time in the future? So perhaps for folks who might have a conflict or are unable to attend this spring.
Also a great question. We do not have definite plans to offer it again. We don't, as far as we don't have a specific date. We would love to see this course continue, and I suspect that after we do a first year of the course, or first offering of the course, that we'll be reviewing it and making any modifications as necessary. So we'll be sure to keep the listserv up to date with information on that. But unfortunately, no next second offering scheduled for this time.
Thanks, Whitney. And we have a nice plug from Judd added in that for folks on the webinar to make sure to tell others who aren't attending today about that course. And Judd, for reference, I was already, my wheels were turning thinking about some of my colleagues internally and some of the campuses I work with, sending that information to them. So I'm delighted that you all mentioned this today so that I and hopefully others on the line can share that out.
And Maureen, I would just have one more thing to elaborate with my last statement there.
Yeah.
While this is an 8-week course, the course is neat in that you can join at any time too. So if you were a couple days late to getting registered when the course starts, you can still dive on in, and the course is open for folks to participate. I believe it's for a month after, and I know Joe's on the line too, so if he can confirm that, that would be great. But I think it's for up to a month after the course ends. So if you didn't get to go through all 8 modules within the 8 weeks, then you still have time. And I just got a confirmation chat in, yes, it's 1 month after the course, so there's time beyond that 8 weeks to engage in the course too, so that helps give a little wiggle room.
Perfect. Thanks, Whitney. And Dan, I think that this gets at your question. Dan had asked about the course being archived on SAAL's website. So Whitney, can you clarify there? It sounds like for folks to be able to access those materials after the fact, that they should in fact register, that the courses won't necessarily be readily available, that they will have to have registered to receive the materials or information after the fact. Is that right?
You will have to register to access that information, and then after the 1 month time, after the 8 weeks is up, then the course will close. We don't have plans for including all of the content on our regular SAAL website at this time, as a real push to participate in the course. Yep. The resource repository is separate from the content of the open course.
I know Whitney had mentioned this earlier, there is static open resources on our website under the assessment resources, but again, it's not the same content that would be offered in the open course. So if somebody's looking for something not within a course structure, there are those modules, but they're not as similar to being in the open course.
Okay. Thank you, Pam. And it looks like, so we'll take the last 2 questions here, but I think to be mindful of folks' time, we'll go to through these 2 questions and then shift gears just a little bit to the second part of our webinar. So we have a question from, well actually Seth, I'm going to save your question for last because I think it's a good one to end on. We have a question from Wallace here about whether there will be any sort of certificate of completion granted for the free course.
Yes, the course, there's no formal grades and there's no certification, a formal certification attached to the course at this point in time. But if you do wish to be recognized for completing the activities, you can receive a statement of accomplishment if you complete a minimum level of competency within the course. So if you complete a certain percentage of the course, then you would get a statement of accomplishment for that. Yes.
Yeah, no, that's
wonderful. Thank you, Whitney. And then last but not least, man, Seth, you could not have timed this better. So Seth is wondering, aside from this webinar, how is Campus Labs partnering or collaborating with SAAL?
I can speak to a little bit from the SAAL side, and then Maureen, you can speak to the Campus Lab side.
Perfect.
I think that Campus Labs and SAAL have a great partnership in terms of our relationship. Lots of our members are Campus Labs campuses, but this is one of the opportunities we had to kind of bring together some of the resources of the 2 organizations. I think that in the future there's opportunities for Campus Labs to help with some content that SAAL is producing through our professional development and vice versa. So I think that we are working together in order to make sure that we're reaching both communities, both the Campus Labs community as well as the Student Affairs Assessment Leaders group.
Yeah, Pam, I was going to echo that, and I think, Seth, to directly answer your question, it is a partnership or collaboration that is constantly emerging, and I think that what we are hoping, our goal in partnering together is to make sure that we are collecting lots of good assessment resources and examples and finding ways to share that out with each of our memberships. And so I wouldn't be surprised if there are additional webinars in the future focused on perhaps high-level or hot assessment topics, perhaps also sharing examples that SAAL members or Campus Lab members are doing, using in the realm of assessment. So I think it's something that we hope you'll certainly stay tuned to, since we are hoping to continue to share perhaps in conference presentations, webinars, maybe even blog posts, the structured conversations that SAAL regularly does. So it is emerging and hopefully something that you'll continue to keep an eye out for. Wow, well, thank you all for the fantastic questions. And so with that in mind, and as I had mentioned, we are going to shift gears a little bit now that you've had a chance to learn more about what SAAL is, some of the projects that SAAL is involved with. We wanted to talk a little bit about SAAL's outlook for the future. So this is really going to be Pam, Brian, and Whitney's take on some key areas of the future of student affairs assessment. So we have three main or primary questions that I will be asking our SAAL board members today. And you all will have a chance to weigh in, ask questions, make comments at the end of those three questions. So certainly, if you have a thought or a question as we are moving through the panel, the virtual panel, so to speak, you're welcome to chat those in. We don't want you to feel like we are ignoring you. We're just going to address them collectively at the end of the virtual panel. So with that being said, one of the first things that I am curious to hear from you all, Whitney, Brian, and Pam, is what significant trends do you see occurring for the role of student affairs assessment, given your work and experience on campus, some of the things that you talk about with your colleagues, and I would expect certainly seeing some things on the listserv. So what are some of the big trends, things that are on your mind, either for 2017 or perhaps even the next 2, 3, or 5 years or so?
I think I'll take the first stab. Currently, right now, I'm in a really large state institution, 4-year research, Tier 1 institution, which the perspective is different, but I've also had the opportunity and privilege to work at a community college and also to work at a small private institution as well. So I think that trends are going to vary based on the institution that you're at. My position when I started 4 years ago was the first person to sit in this position. I'm still an office of one, but have recently added a research assistant to my office. So I think at larger institutions, the trend really has been to grow competency in staff in assessment for student affairs, because there's been a lot of demand of bringing student affairs professionals to the table towards the conversation of what impact does student affairs have, which is going to feel different, I think, at a smaller institution. When I was in a smaller institution, you wear many hats, and so student affairs is already at the table for those conversations, so they don't necessarily separate student affairs assessment from the role of student affairs. So those are some of the trends in terms of the engagement on campus and really being involved in a lot of more campus-wide tellings of stories and not so much just staying in one small area. So that's a big, broad swath. I'm sure the other panelists might have some other information that they'd like to share too.
Thanks, Pam. I'd also add my observation of how I've seen the focus of my assessment conversations changing over the last 6 years. So when I began in student affairs assessment 6 years ago, the conversations very much evolved around student learning outcomes and student learning within student affairs touch points. And there's definitely I've seen a growing focus on data analysis, strategic planning, specifically related to recruitment and enrollment management areas. That's an area I'm delving into a lot deeper on my institution, though we do include enrollment services as part of our student affairs division here. But the data analysis is a really big thing, a big aspect of my work now than it was 6 years ago. And I would say I would recommend that folks entering into student affairs assessment, that being able to acquire some data mining skills will be really essential to your role moving forward, because I feel it's so much more prevalent in the student affairs assessment conversation now than it was even a few years ago.
So I was thinking about something that Whitney said, and she talked about the way that the role has changed in her 6 years, and I was thinking about that from my lens as a faculty member, and kind of thinking about the evolution of the scholarship of assessment. And obviously the Journal of Student Affairs Inquiry is some indication that there's growth in this area, and there's an increasing trend that folks who are engaged in the day-to-day work of student affairs assessment are also engaged in contributions to the scholarship of assessment. And so in preparing for today, I was thinking back to something that Trudy Banter wrote in and building a scholarship of assessment in 2002. And she noted that the scholarship of assessment is framed on and has as its central purpose systematic inquiry, all about deepening and extending our foundations of knowledge that underlie assessment. And this is what I've been observing for the last few years, is that folks are working hard to not just, again, share. So it's one of the pieces that I mentioned in the journal is sharing those program evaluations and those stories about the work that's being done. But SAAL is a great example of people coming together to share perspectives and share experiences. But it's not just framed around, well, here's what we're doing at my campus. What I've been observing over the last few years being part of SAAL is people are really engaging those conversations from this perspective of advancing a scholarship of assessment. Folks are contributing to each other's work in very mindful ways and very reflective ways. And so that's a trend that I think is only going to continue to increase.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. And so I guess for the three of you then, given some of these trends you see on the horizon, maybe broader division or campus-wide conversation about assessment, connecting data at a program or department level to divisional or institutional frameworks, data mining and analysis with focus on student success and retention, and as Brian said, really advancing a scholarship of assessment. So taking those trends together, what do you think that's going to mean for our day-to-day work for student affairs assessment? What kind of changes might occur for, again, our day-to-day work?
I can dive into that one first. It's important to always recognize that with establishing a culture of evidence, a culture of assessment, that really takes time within an institution. And so the day-to-day work will change depending on where your institution is in that process of developing that culture. And so I would say for me, with the change in day-to-day work, because we've been engaging and developing our assessment culture here since 2010, we've done so much work with building assessment capacity among our team here at UAA, and that our staff are really well prepared to have assessment conversations because it's so embedded at this point in our assessment culture. And it's also really interesting because we've seen that as new professionals are entering the field, and as they're coming to my institution in particular, that because graduate programs are now including more courses about student affairs assessment and learning outcomes, that staff are already entering the full-time profession with that knowledge and with that skill set. So we're spending less time in our day-to-day role at the divisional level training folks on student affairs assessment. And now at this point, we're really able to dive deeper into those conversations about meeting metrics and how we're moving the needle on our key performance indicators. So at this point, our conversations are much more data-driven on a day-to-day basis, and because we've established that foundation, built that assessment capacity.
Great, Whitney. I was just going to say that mirrors a little bit of my experiences as well. We spend less time talking about how to write a learning outcome on our campus as well, but I would say that one of the additions to that is we're really growing data analytics and data visualization. Because I was at Office of One for so long, I got a research assistant mostly for looking at student-level data and aggregating that across the division. So actually looking at how you analyze your data, what does that mean for the institution? Also looking at the visualization piece, what we can do with other software packages or even internally to tell our story. People want to see the numbers, but they also want to see what that represents visually to the institution. So those are also some key changes I think that's happened in the last even 4 years here.
And Pam, I think you've touched on this in your responses to both questions in terms of being an Office of One and wearing multiple hats. And Whitney, you talked about being able to look at information and data and moving the needle on key performance indicators. And what I see is some of the big changes that have been coming in the day-to-day work is so much more of a focus on student affairs assessment professionals being integrated across the campus. And so student affairs assessment folks are working with institutional research, maybe outreach offices or other units. And it's not simply to have student affairs at the table, but it's because of what student affairs represents. And you both have touched on those aspects in your answers as well. The student affairs practitioners are being asked to contribute or even take the lead on projects. Like Whitney mentioned, what is the role of student affairs in moving the needle on those KPIs? And so, again, you both touched on this too. Being able to do that relies on being able to integrate data and analysis from multiple pockets of institutional data, and being able to have those dialogues in a very integrated fashion across campus.
Awesome. Thank you all for weighing in on that one. And as you know, it's interesting to hear each of you talk somewhat individually about your experiences on campus or what you hear other folks saying, because I think from a campus labs perspective, we are often seeing that on a large scale, you know, getting some sense of a trend across campuses rather than like a specific deep focus on what is happening at one individual campus. And I would certainly echo all the things that you have had to say, and it's interesting that the parallel in some ways between the trends that you're seeing in student affairs assessment, how work is going to be changing, as I think it was Whitney who said, becoming more data-driven on a day-to-day basis, and then Pam had said a growing focus on data visualization and analytics, that I think in some ways that's kind of where we're shifting as a society, that it feels like data is everywhere sometimes, that it's there, it is always being collected. I was in the airport the other week and JetBlue had a little kiosk where you could weigh in just very quickly about your experience. I think it involved some smiley faces. And so, you know, if folks can continue to find opportunities like that to first identify what are the key metrics that you are interested in that will help to tell your story, and then find a way to systematically collect and then share that back with folks across campus, and then speaking to what Brian had said, really being connected with lots of different stakeholders to help tell the story of student affairs, to make sure that folks know the impact that we're having and the work that we're doing. And I guess connected to that then, though I suspect many of us on the line are well aware of the good work that we do, how we contribute to student success on campus. I'm curious if the three of you can speak a little bit more to what impact you think student affairs assessment professionals have on the rest of student affairs at an institution, or perhaps even broader, to the impact that they have on other divisions within an institution.
Well, I think it goes back to kind of what we were all sharing about responses to the previous question, and that there's this integration piece, and I've been seeing that integration piece come into play pretty significantly when it comes time to working on accreditation efforts. Accrediting agencies are moving away from their interest in the siloed sharing of artifacts or even narratives as a means of demonstrating adherence with standards. Instead, I've been seeing review teams look at or looking for evidence of data and analysis being discussed institutionally, that folks are stepping outside of their buildings, outside of their silos, and that those discussions around data and deep analysis are leading to decisions, and that then those decisions are being evaluated and assessed. And so that the impact piece is that student affairs are a central piece because of that integration and because of the connection to framing and understanding the student experience holistically. That there's student affairs impact is on the centrality of that integration and that collaboration and cooperation.
I'm in the midst of some serious accreditation work in my office as well right now, so I will definitely echo what Brian just said about the connectivity to the other areas of the institution in that process. So it feels good to be so welcomed as the student affairs unit in that accreditation process, and how valued our impact is in that report. So I echo that, Brian. And another thing I would add is that the student affairs assessment professional, it really sets the tone for how decisions are made within a division of student affairs. If you're a student affairs division where the assessment professional is really leading a lot of the annual reporting efforts, that also has a big impact on the way that departments share their story out with the use of data. And so I really feel like positions that are a primary assessment role really drives that conversation. And because they're engaged with so many different entities across the division, they're also a great person to connect different units within student affairs and then with other areas of the institution to share data and to connect stories in that way. So they're great in setting the tone and driving that collaboration.
Oh, Whitney, that's so true. I was just at an event where somebody's like, and let me tell you the data about it, and they look directly at me to make sure that that was an okay thing to share. So I think that being the professional in the room, people look at you as like, data is now one of the reasons that we're sharing what we're sharing and the decisions that we're making. Which leads me to the fact that I'm not the only one on our division of Student Affairs Enrollment Services who holds the data. I am sharing that because right now it's a critical competency for every student affairs professional, whether you are in civic engagement or you're in housing or you're in the registrar's office. The data and the competency to do assessment really now resides within every professional in divisions of student affairs and enrollment services. So I think that's one of the biggest impact of having a student affairs professional in your division is really passes that critical competency on to others.
Great, thank you all. And Pam, that's a nice exclamation point to end that question in our virtual panel there. So thank you all for weighing in there. I appreciate your thoughts, insights, and sharing a bit about your experiences. And I think, though I know we are right at the end of the hour, I would love to invite folks who are still in attendance to chat in any questions that you all have for the panelists, for me, or perhaps even thoughts that you have, things that you'd like to follow up on, comment on, etc. Feel free to chat in those questions now. And I should also have noted that this is a time we had talked about potentially unmuting some of the SAAL board members. And Ted, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if you're comfortable, let me see if I can find you on the attendee list. I'd be happy to unmute you so you can speak a little bit more about your question. Would that be okay with you? I'll wait for a chat in from you. Oh, okay. So I will, on behalf of TED, plug or mention that there are some recent publications out there, and I'm not sure, Pam, Brian, or Whitney, if you know enough about those to speak to them, or if it's enough to mention the publications that Ted referenced.
Well, I don't know what specifically Ted is referencing, so I'm not really sure which publications to point toward. There's been a big uptick in publications geared at supporting folks doing this work, whether getting started or leading a division. So there have been some books recently, and if folks would like to reach out, I'd love to have some conversations via email, or we can pick up the phone and chat. And I've got some lists of some of those recent books and other publications I could certainly share out via email, but not sure specifically what Ted is referencing.
Thanks, Brian. It sounded like it was Ted had referenced generally some of the recent publications, okay. And I suspect your response there was just perfect, that there are a number of them available, and it sounds like there has in fact been an uptick, so you may be a perfect resource for folks who might like to learn more about that. So thank you. Oh, and Ted has weighed in, specifically one about coordinating student affairs divisional assessment. I think I have read that one. In fact, I'm not sure if that is something that any of you would like to speak to, or perhaps if it's enough to mention that the publication on coordinating student affairs divisional assessment may be worth some specific attention, or might be a good read for people in the audience.
Yes, I think it would be.
And Ted is quoting Aaron. I am not sure who Aaron is, but Aaron says, quote, "It's fabulous," with an exclamation point, end quote. So if that's not enough to sway you to check it out, I don't know what is. Oh, Aaron is one of the coordinating authors. Thanks, Ted. It doesn't look like we have any other questions coming in at this time, though I'm keeping an eye on the question box to see if there are any last minute ones. Folks, you are welcome to reach out to any or all of us. I think, speaking on behalf of everyone who had presented in the webinar today, I think we would love to chat with you more about student affairs assessment, any lingering questions or thoughts that you have. So do feel free to reach out, and thank you all again for being such an attentive audience. We appreciate your great questions and the important work that you are doing in the field of student affairs. So thank you all again. Please reach out with questions, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thanks, and bye-bye.